Still have some folks joining. Okay, yes, Trevor is reminding us that we're going to all be discussing downtown. So no matter which room you end up, we'll all be discussing downtown tonight. And you are in the Sconset group. I see a bunch of people still unassigned, but I think we'll get started. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I see some familiar faces, some that I haven't seen before. So welcome. My name is Kate Edwards. I'm with Arcadis. And I also have tonight with me Evan Raffi from Arcadis, and we'll be your facilitators for this evening. We are going to be talking about both Sconset and the downtown area. And I'm going to be sharing my screen in a moment. We have some ground rules. We have right now 19 people in this group. I think if others want to join a Sconset group, depending, they may make a second one. So if for some reason some people move, don't be alarmed. We have planned for some overflow depending on the number of people who come. And I'm going to share my screen so we can get started on some of these other things. Let's see. All right, can you all see that?
Yep, I can.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Okay. Get my screen set up here. Okay, so tonight we're going to be working in a collaborative work session. This is meant to be a workshop and to talk through some of these things. Again, these are preliminary strategies. They're not final in any way. They are key. We're going to show you the key resilience issues in each area and explore the preliminary resilience strategy that combines options to address these issues. They're composed of a series of resilience approaches tailored for the area that can be implemented over the next 5 to 10 years. And they're presented as one feasible way resilience could be achieved. And that's based on our evaluation of risk and technical expertise around implementation and understanding how resources may best be used. So we're going to step through these things. And I think we have a next slide. We do have some ground rules and guidelines. We want to acknowledge everyone's voice and time. If you find yourself speaking frequently, you might consider opening up the floor to your fellow group members. We really look forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Please speak from your own experience. We want to know what Nantucket means to you. If there are several group members with things to share, we'll try to utilize the raise hand function in Zoom and we'll call on you. If you are able and willing to, please consider turning on your camera. If at any time you would like to leave the breakout room and return to the main room, there's an option to click and say return to main session. If at any time you would like to leave the meeting entirely, you can click on leave meeting. Okay, so let's jump in. All right, this is a nice aerial view of Sconset, and I'm just gonna set my other screen up here. And I know we have about, I just want to just double check. We have about 20 participants. So we may run into a situation where we want you to raise your hands, but we'll see how this goes. Really trying to emulate that workshop feeling, guys, but Zoom is hard sometimes. So just shout out to me if I'm not calling on you. Okay, so there are a variety of approaches that can be taken to reduce risk and build resilience in Sconset. Relocation of roadways and infrastructure, dune nourishment, installation of breakwaters, and preparing for retreat are all considered in this set of options that can be employed as part of a long-term adaptation strategy. And let's go over some of the key resilience issues. So here in Sconset, key resilience issues include loss of critical access roadways, including parts of Milestone Road. You'll see, I'll orient you to the legend. We have the 2070 1% annual chance flood extent. So that's in red here. You'll see it along the shoreline and up into part of Milestone Road. We also have 2050 and 2070 erosion lines here along the coast. And you'll see that that is where erosion is expected to change the shoreline. So in 2050, your shoreline along this stretch of the coast will be approximately here. Can everyone see my cursor when I'm doing that? I just want to make sure. Okay. And in 2070, approximately here. So I just wanted to orient you to that. And we will experience, due to erosion up here, more of the loss of the roadway and critical access. Damage and or disruption to private residences will be experienced, and erosion of bluffs and loss of public access to the bluff and beach. So I know that we may want to talk a little bit more about these things. I'm going to jump to the next set, but we can flip back to any of these as we open up our discussion here. This is the preliminary framework, and I know that many of you are aware of a separate but linked study for the Baxter Road area, and this is the just showing you the area of study for that. To address each of the issues identified in the previous slide, we've outlined a number of resilience approaches that could work for this area. Many of the approaches apply along the majority of the coastline. So you'll see that we have things like expanding the existing, the existing tow stabilization is in, that's the GeoTube project here. Tow stabilization along Baxter Road, and there's a possibility for expansion of that system or putting in another one down here. There's relocation of roadway access. So this is Baxter Road right here, and you could do some sort of relocation of the road and moving of homes. Also some relocation of roadways down here off of Milestone Road. I think this is Codfish Park, am I saying that right? That area, and Gully Road. And these areas are, you'll see the erosion is creeping up into there as well. We would combine a lot of these types of resilience measures with homeowner best management practices. That means letting you know and giving you guidelines on how to protect your home, how to look at the water that may come off of your property during rainstorms and go over the bluff and cause additional erosion from over the top. So that's that homeowner best management practices. There are options for things like near shore breakwaters or near shore berms, which would come out into the water. And we'll show you a little bit. I have pictures of some of these. And then dune nourishment and stabilization of the dunes is in yellow. So let me show you what some of these look like. So this is just one, it's this nice aerial shot that we do have. But imagine that these same types of options are also options all along the coast for Sconset, all the way down to where Milestone Road is. So the purple road could be a road that gets relocated, and we know that there's one option for relocation already on the table. The nearshore breakwaters would be located, as the name says, near shore, but out in the water. Dune nourishment and stabilization. One thing I will note is that stabilization of this bluff would be a system. So there's toe stabilization, which goes at the bottom of the bluff of some sort. Right now, in this particular area, that's the geotubes. That doesn't mean that that's the chosen thing that has to happen everywhere. It's just part of stabilizing the bluff is stabilizing that toe. That is combined with bluff stabilization, such as additional plantings and making sure that the bluff face is stabilized. And that is also combined as a system with dune nourishment. So when we stabilize the toe, the bluff, and we keep the bluff, that beach is not getting fed the sand that it would normally get fed during these time periods. And so we need to provide sand and make sure that there's enough nourishment to contribute back to the system. So that is one way that a system would work. The nearshore breakwaters would slow down the waves from hitting the shore. And then all along here, again, as we said, we would want to combine any of these with homeowner guidelines about how to best control stormwater and other ways, plantings, vegetation that can help from the top to keep the bluff from eroding. So we really want to just talk about, are any of these alternatives that we've kind of shown you off the table? Are they alternatives you'd like to see being prioritized in the near term and then out into the long term, now that you've seen those 2050 and 2070 lines? And I can flip back to the risk slides as well. So wanted to kind of check in and see who might have their hand up or who wants to chime in. I know y'all are not shy because I know some of you. Helmut, go ahead.
Well, surprise, surprise. I would just point out that the GEO project has virtually perfectly met its objectives when it was installed in order to keep Baxter Road from being breached. It has stopped erosion there without exception, and it's been very closely, much more closely monitored than almost any other project of its kind, with regular surveys of the beach and bank, of course, as well as the bottom of the ocean, and has observed a community which contributes substantial property taxes to the town, and avoided the relocation of the road, which would be required in order for homes to be continued to be accessed, which would be extraordinarily expensive for the town. So it's preserved a historic community. It saved lots of money. It's one of the highest parts of the island, so the preservation we're talking about can go well into the next century, which is much more difficult for many other parts of the island.
Thank you.
Um, And it's been essentially totally privately financed. So our proposal is that we extend that for any threatened parks that eventually, with high enough sea level rise, that would include the center of Sconset Village, which includes a couple of homes built 1600.
Thanks, Helmut. And I think to summarize, your preference is protect, right? So do continue some of that bluff stabilization. Lori, I did see your hand up.
Mhm.
Am I muted now?
Yeah,
Can I speak?
no,
Yeah.
I can.
I can hear you.
I just wanted to know I'm curious, what is a nearshore breakwater? What would that mean and what would it cost?
So sometimes you'll see they look like, I don't know if I have a good picture of it. It's hard to see on this this thing, but they look like they can be like rocks that they look like little rocks standing up out of the water. They can also be submerged. So you can kind of see them here. They're little breakwaters, and what they do is they stick up into the water or they're submerged. But depending on their design, they would be along the coast here, potentially. And as wave comes in, the wave hits the rock before it gets to the shore. And so that takes away some of the wave's energy and doesn't allow it to hit the bluff there and the beach as hard. Still would probably need to be combined with some sort of tow stabilization to prevent collapse of the bluff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have questions, thoughts?
Hi, Kate, it's David.
Hi, David. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So how deep is it off the shore there? My understanding was that it was fairly deep.
It does drop off quite a bit. We've looked at the bathymetry, and I don't have a to scale map here, but pretty near shore. You know, we're already at 25 feet, so we wouldn't have a ton of room to work with. However, there are opportunities for maybe submerged breakwaters. So these are things that you would look at in a really detailed design. It is probably feasible, but maybe a little bit difficult depending on the room needed during the design. So we are continuing to look at that.
Mhm.
But it does drop off pretty steeply after that.
Right, that's what I thought. Well, just for the record, while I'm speaking, I guess,
Yeah.
I'm with Helmut. You know, I think both my wife Dorothy and I believe that the geotubes are working, and you know, we are very supportive of the project. You know, I said to Dorothy the other day, you know, I might some Saturday sit out front of our house. We live at 100 Baxter Road, and count the number of people and cars that walk by up to the lighthouse. It's just incredible what a draw and what a beautiful part of the island that walk up Baxter Road is to the lighthouse.
Right, and I do think one of the things to consider in our trade-offs discussion, right, is the trade-off being, you know, if, in our risk map here, right, so these erosion lines, that's truly where we expect the shoreline to be. And so if that's where the edge of the bluff is, that road can no longer stay there, right? So that road needs to move. And so that
Right.
is one of the trade-offs. It's the expense of the houses moving and the infrastructure, including everything that goes with that road. But that also means that there's probably something like the geotubes, whether it's the geotubes or something else that has to be at that toe and has to provide that toe stabilization in order to preserve the bluff and the line and hold that line at least for a time. And one of the things I would say that I have been repeating and trying to our team has been repeating for probably all of Nantucket is that, you know, these are adaptation periods of time. So this gets reevaluated if things are not going well or if something stops working. We need to reevaluate and try something else, or we reevaluate and years from now, maybe that's when you're looking at retreat. But if we're planning for it, as Trevor said, now, and we understand when that time period or what those trigger points at which we switch to a different adaptation method are, then that's what this planning aims to do. Diana, I saw your hand up there.
Yes, thanks. I had a question about the lighthouse, which wasn't in your
Yes.
program that you showed earlier, and whether that's in any of those zones. And also, to what extent the idea of running access roads in from the Pulpus Road has been examined.
Yes, so I know that
Access roads, like long driveways to small
if I
groups of the houses and a road up to the lighthouse.
yeah, I'm trying to find one of our other graphics that I have. The lines do continue to some degree. Let's see if you can imagine, they do kind of continue along the shore here. The new lighthouse location would be affected, but I think it'll be longer term. But that's an answer, Diana, that we will owe back to you once I get a good graphic back up. But yes, so one of the considerations has been, let me show. I wish I had some of my other graphics here tonight, guys. One of the options has been this sort of a thought about realignment and connectivity to Pulpus Road. This may not be the chosen realignment. There would be, you know, some jogging. Of course, homes here would have to, this involves some land acquisition and things like that to move the road for the homes that are back here. But the aim in any plan would be if the road were moved, you'd be providing connectivity to Pulpus Road to the extent possible in the, you know, whatever term is left out here. There's little easements and access ways that go out toward the water, and so that road would have to also provide connectivity to those. Additionally, the roadway here would have to meet all the criteria that people such as the fire chief, you know, what width does it have to be, turning around areas, does it need to be paved or not, maybe, but all that stuff would have to be taken into consideration.
I mean, my question was, as an alternative to making a road parallel to Baxter Road,
Just move to Pulpus.
lots of almost like long driveways in from Pulpus Road to groups of houses. So like they're sharing a long driveway and an access road into the lighthouse. I don't know.
So that would be an option, but one of the considerations there would be the utilities. So water, sewer, electric, and telecom all run underneath this road. So then you'd be doing it several times.
Yeah.
Oh yes, thank you. Who's sending me this? Rennie, thank you. The lighthouse is expected to experience erosion between 2050 and 2070. So sometime between those two periods, thank you, Rennie. So that we can't see it on our map here, but that's when that expected. Deanne, I see your hand up. Sorry if it's been up for a while.
Thank you, Kate. I think I'm technologically challenged on this.
You and me both.
I entered into the chat and I will just repeat it. I think you are aware that Nantucket voters overwhelmingly passed a non-binding ballot question a couple of years ago, indicating they wanted to preserve and protect Nantucket beaches during a time of sea level rise. Expanding the current geotubes would further degrade and eventually destroy the public beach below the bluff. The property owners up on top of the bluff do not own the beach. The citizens of Nantucket do. This stretch of beach is the longest shoreline that the public owns. By expanding the geotubes, we would hard armor 7% of Nantucket's otherwise natural shoreline. This is contrary to what we value as a community, our beaches.
Thank you, Deanne. I want to make sure that Evan gets that on our board as well. So just to repeat that back, this stretch of coastline is public beach. This is these structures or whatever would be put here for tow stabilization could potentially have impacts to the beach and beach goers and all things that are valued about the beach down here. So want to make sure that that is captured as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see, Diana, do you still have your hand up or do you?
No, I don't.
Okay. How about you, Lori? I just want to check.
I'd like to echo David's sentiments that the geotubes have done such an extraordinary job with no harm to anyone, and we feel blessed because of that.
Excellent. Thank you, Lori. I see Mark's hand up as well. Hi, Mark.
I guess I'm a new homeowner here on Baxter Road and a student of the work that's been done to date. And at least at first instinct, I guess I have a question and an observation. Obviously, I'm keenly supportive of the work that's been done to date on the Geotube project to preserve Baxter Road, and curious what evidence Arcadis has collected that would suggest that doing nothing would create beaches that would be used more than that beach is be used today. Because at least as over the 10 years we've been visiting here prior to buying, it doesn't seem that we see a lot of beachgoers on this beach. And so I'm just curious, would doing nothing create more utilization of the beach?
That's a good question. I think we as Arcadis don't have that answer. That's something we haven't really approached because I don't know that we have the data. I think the things that we do know right now are that the projections are, possibly taking away some of the access, but alternative access could be created. We also see that there's a potential for, there's risk to homes here. So I think there's risk to homes and risk to the access. And as Deanne said, there's a strong voice also saying armoring or putting in something along the beach would be detrimental to some of the fundamental understandings of how natural resources are valued in Nantucket. And that's sort of a qualitative thing right now rather than quantitative, but it's valid nonetheless. So these are some of the things that we're considering, and which is why we're coming, to the broader community. And of course, I know that the reason I'm here is because in this group is because we knew that there would be probably heavy focus on Baxter Road. There's serious risk there, but we want to make sure that the things that we are talking about putting in the plan as options for Sconset are, are community supported. So I do want to hear from a few others who maybe haven't heard from. Meredith.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So we are new owners as well on Baxter Road, 71 Baxter. And we're obviously very supportive of what Helmut said in regards to the geotube. But to respond to the question, just from a practical reality kind of perspective of use of the beach, we were here a lot because of the pandemic with our kids homeschooling. And so we have two kids, 10 and 9, and we actually have walked up and down the beach all the way past the geotubes, in front of the geotubes. And so, while, they're still in use, and it's, obviously we are supportive of whatever can be done to preserve, the homes and the lighthouse and Baxter Road where it is today.
Excellent. Thank you, Meredith. So new homeowners, Mark and Meredith, thank you. Thanks for coming tonight. Emily, I see you there. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Oh no, did we lose you? Emily, come back. Oh no, hopefully she'll come back. All right. How about, I'm just curious, we have about, Evan, how much time do we have left? 5 or 10, between 5 and 10 minutes, I'll say.
Between 5 and 10, yeah.
Before we go to downtown. And before we do that, I wanted to see if anybody else we haven't heard from wants to weigh in on this. I think what I'm hearing from some folks, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, we've captured what we have, but to the answers to the questions are things that are anything off the table. And yes, to some, I think off the table is the idea of putting strategies along the beach on public property, and to others, off the table is not protecting. And so that's obviously not a surprise to me, but just wanted to repeat that back. Holly, do you have a question or a comment?
Hi, Kate. How are you?
Good.
As you know, my position with the town, I'm curious about what Arcadis thoughts are about Codfish Park. Codfish Park has seen a lot of changes over the year. I don't want to kind of take away from Baxter, but
no, I think we would need to talk about this whole coastline before the day is done.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
And Codfish Park has changed dramatically. I remember as a kid, houses going over with storms. I remember the beach used to be very long, and it's actually fluctuated over the years. So I'm just curious on where you all were on that one.
Yeah, so right now we see obviously the loss of the roadway just even to access the area is a concern by 2070. And we do have some water coming up around this area, which I think I have the right area. This is Codfish Park, right? Correct, down here? Okay. And the erosion lines, there is, to my knowledge, and you guys can all correct me, there's kind of a new dune over there that was put in. Is that correct? Does anybody, am I making that up? I think there's a new dune structure or some new, at least fencing in dune, possibly. I can't remember. But what we're seeing here is not a lot of flooding, but erosion. So I think the erosion of this area, those homes on Gully Way, might go away similar to up north. So the erosion lines here along the coast are projected, like the north is in pretty imminent danger. And down here in the south, we see a bunch of homes. And so the primary risk, thank you, Evan, is really erosion. And so you would be seeing similar risk, and so probably similar types of resilient strategies here, along with whatever is or is not done, like potential to move the road and just create access for those homes to get in behind here. Let's see, I just want to see Matthew. I haven't heard from you yet, but I see your hand is up.
Hi, Kate, thanks. So if I understood correctly, I think you just said that doing nothing is off the table. Is that correct?
No, well, to some people, I'm just kind of repeating back. I've heard some.
Oh, okay.
No, not for everybody. Doing nothing is not off the table.
Okay, so there is the idea that maybe what we could do is do nothing, no tow protection, no nourishment of the bluff, or no close to shore breakwater. And then what would happen is there would just be a kind of full-on retreat mode. All houses would be relocated, the road would be relocated, services would be relocated, and the beach would continue to be a kind of natural beach that if people wanted to walk along it, they could. And that beach would continue to move to the west, and then eventually the road would be relocated again in all likelihood, and so on. That's the do nothing idea.
Yes, so the do nothing idea would be really where those erosion lines fall. That's your new coastline by 2070. And then 2100, we've seen it, it's a little ways out into the future. By 2100, the erosion line actually gets into right around here, hitting Sankaty and Pulpus Road. So you're losing another part of a roadway. So, you know, the do nothing is loss or managed retreat, however you look at that, but it has its risks. Again, a trade-off, right?
Okay, thanks. It seems like that would be have a pretty catastrophic impact on the town of Sconset. It wouldn't resemble Sconset as we've known it for the last 100 years.
All right, I want to get to Emily because Emily, we lost you before.
Thank you.
Oh, you're in a different location. Hello.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm sorry my phone battery died. Thank you for welcoming me back. One way that also doing nothing changes Sconset is the nature of the bluff. One thing that saddens me is how the beautiful vegetation that we see towards the Sconset Village used to be going up all the way towards the lighthouse. And we can say that then somehow we're preserving the beach by doing nothing, but we're letting the natural beauty of the bluff be turned into just a dirt wall, which is another form of natural beauty. But there's something worth preserving in the beautiful wildflowers and all. So I wanted to make that point.
Yeah, can you, do you have, maybe I could help point it out, but do you have a location in mind where you're thinking is it just mostly in the northern area, Emily, or all along this shoreline?
Well, it's just been moving from, it used to be, just up towards the lighthouse where the bluff looked like dirt. And frankly, if I can just put it this way, I've been to Martha's Vineyard and I've seen these cliffs of dirt. And I say, oh, how much I like Nantucket, that we have these beautiful, places full of Rosa rugosa. And I guess I don't know exactly if it's 71 or where it is that it's the Rosa rugosa is still, and the beach grass is all covering much of the bluff. but there's and that point like is receding towards Sconset Village. But if we were to protect the shoreline, then that bluff and the natural beauty there would be protected for future generations to enjoy, and we won't look like Martha's Vineyard.
I take your point. I like this. Okay, thank you for explaining that a little bit more to me. And I do think there's opportunities as we look at adaptation out in the future for new plantings as well. So those would be encouraged along any bluff stabilization.
Kate, I think we have time for one more hand, and then we'll move to downtown.
Yes, does any do? Let's see. I see like 4 of them. I'm going to call on Deanne. Deanne, are you still there? Do you still have your hand up? No. How about Meredith? I see your
Hey,
hand up.
I'm here.
Oh. Hey, Deanne.
I'm sorry. As we're looking at your screenshot, we can't help but notice all of the open land behind this small strip of development along Northern Baxter Road. Has your team considered the concept of transfer of development rights?
We are looking at a suite of options for like policy and like guidance and regulatory pieces. So that will be something that is taken into consideration. I'm not sure how far along, honestly, Deanne, that part of the CRP is at this time, but I can get back to you on that.
Thank you, Kate. I think it's an important consideration in Nantucket, where we're fortunate enough so that much of the interior of the island that is higher and safer is open land, and that we do have room to move back from the eroding coast and create an undeveloped buffer along our shoreline, which I understand is among the best practices of coastal management in a time of sea level rise. So I hope you'll consider it, please.
Thank you, Deanne. I think we'll make sure that that goes. Thank you, Evan, right on the list here. We are going to move to downtown. We have a little bit more to talk about, and time is flying. If I am not calling on you, please, like, you guys don't seem too rowdy yet, so please unmute yourself if I have not seen your hand and you haven't gotten a chance to speak. I think I can see everybody's little box on the screen, but feel free to yell at me. We are going to move to downtown, where I'll show you some of the stuff going on down here. So here's downtown, and another beautiful aerial shot from our team of beautiful Nantucket. And I just want to scroll up to my notes for these slides. So all groups are looking at downtown tonight because you all have a stake in downtown, right? So let's read the statement. Defending downtown. To preserve and enhance quality of life in downtown, this PROTECT approach recommends a series of structural approaches that offer flood protection to the neighborhood core and essential facilities. Erosion management in the Brant Point and Monomoy reduces risk while maintaining water views and access. So we go to the next slide. Key resilience issues in downtown include damage and disruption of private residences from flooding that will increase over time, damage and disruption of businesses and community assets from flooding, especially in the downtown core. Examples include Town Hall, the Whaling Museum, and Stop and Shop. Flooding at critical infrastructure, Steamship Authority, Steamboat Wharf, and an electrical substation. loss of roadways and critical access, including along Easy Street, Washington Street, and streets leading to Steamboat Wharf, the highest risk essential facility on the island. I'm sorry, guys, I've been not enough caffeine. Breach of barrier beaches at Co2, and loss of eelgrass habitat within the harbor. If there are resilience issues down here that we've missed, we'll kind of hold them and talk about them again as we get into our discussion, because I just want to show you the framework on the next slide. So again, here's one possible set of solutions. We're coming to you tonight to chat about them. To address each of the issues identified here, we've created a preliminary resilience framework for the area. Different types of approaches are suggested in different areas depending on the issues to be addressed. Within each of the shaded zones, a number of different approaches may be applied. So you can see here we have areas where we would do some sort of nature-based erosion management, and I'll speak to that in a minute. We have places where we've identified water access as being something that may need to be adapted, either raised or gates, things like that. We have resilient transportation corridors along Hulbert Ave and Easton Street, and then more of a possible structural flood protection along Easy Street and Washington Street, and I will show you a little bit more about that. Anything that isn't raised on a main corridor and isn't outright protected, any of the buildings that are out in front, so to speak, of some of these protection strategies, again, the protect strategy, these will be areas that need to think about resilient buildings. So making your building more resilient. And I think I want to check my notes. Well, let's see. Any other notes here, Rennie or Evan, that I missed? We'll jump, I think, to the next slide to show you a little bit more. So as we think about that protect strategy and the more structural idea here, you'll see that, and we're going to blow these up. I have another blow up of these, but you'll see that along the line, we have different colors for the height of what that roadway or barrier would need to be. And we've drawn some section drawings along each piece. And this is what the height of the barrier or the road would need to be at. And this is how it might look. And I'm going to show you that blown up, but you can see it in comparison to the buildings and maybe some trees and cars and person heights, just so you get that idea. One thing to note is that this is only to protect in 2070 from the mean monthly high water, so a monthly high tide, say. It's not going to provide full protection during a 1% annual chance storm by 2070. So that's one consideration and trade-off. Let's see. I don't know. Do we have one more slide to show you all on this? So yes, so this is kind of, again, those strategies laid out. We have the buildings here, the roadways that are in green are those more of a structural protection, either a raised roadway or raised roadway combined with some sort of, elevated protection for that mean monthly high water. Resilient wharf and adapted water access. So this might be raised or built up in some way to create a more resilient or transportation corridor. And then enhancement and stabilization of the beaches and dunes in the area. Do we have I didn't actually show this slide for the last one, but we talked a lot about it. But here's some of the considerations. The resilient transportation corridors and flood protection will protect some private residences, but not all. We talked a little bit about that. Waterfront private property owners, therefore, would largely need to protect themselves. Flood protection infrastructure will reduce risk to downtown core, but alter potentially the existing character. And then long-term, there might be removal of waterfront infrastructure and private residences from the areas subject to tidal flooding, and adaptation of resilient transportation corridors to even higher elevations. Flood protection infrastructure to higher elevations again, and relocation of public access points. So I wanted to jump back to, maybe we'll speak to this portion right now overall and just see, is there anything here? Are there other resilience approaches you think we should be considering? Or do you feel that the protect approach is the right approach for downtown? And I know I probably have some folks who still have their hands up from last time, so I don't know if you really do want to speak, but I think Holly does. So I'm going to go with Holly first.
Thanks, Kate. As you are well aware, as the preservation planner for the town, we just recently completed our MVP action grant for Resilient Nantucket for those design guidelines. And I think it's important for folks that have not been involved with that process of knowing that we have design guidelines that are based on the Secretary of the Interior standards for flooding adaptation for our historic district. Very important. And on side note, the National Park Service just came out this month with their illustrated document to follow, which is fantastic. But I think that's important to see how that correlates with the coastal resiliency plan. I think it's very important because people are going to sit here and say, well, how do I make my building resilient? What does that mean? And I just wanted to mention that that information, those design guidelines were unanimously adopted by the Nantucket Historic District Commission on June 11th, and it's available on the town's website, as well as we do have, thanks to one of the consultants for the CRP, the Craig Group, worked on a toolkit for property owners, and it's available on the town's website as well. And it's very interactive, very full of information, and I know there'll be a connection with the CRP. But I think it's very important for people that are in this breakout session to know of those different strategies that have been put out there, but also know that there is guidance from the federal government for historic structures and non-historic structures that the town have worked on, and where this will be the area wide, and what do we see, and exactly looking at right here where it says resilient buildings, what exactly that means. So I just wanted to mention that for the group. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Holly. And I would add that there is a lot of connectivity between the planning that's going on in Nantucket, and so the CRP will also offer some additional guidance as we come out with our recommendations or the recommended path forward here.
Can I ask one more question, Kate? Sorry.
Yeah.
The elevated roadways that were proposed are really interesting. And I'm curious on
these
the
are
guidance
Vince's favorite.
Yeah, it's nice to see a visual of what that would mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious on looking at how the guidance from the National Park Service would relate to this, because they do talk about landscape as well.
Yeah, since it's just sort of come out, I think that's worth comparing notes on, Holly. So I'm kind of glad you brought it up, because it's something that we're going to have to take a look at. There's also, we talk about trade-offs and considerations. I myself am a stormwater person, so the minute that I see a roadway like this, that's where my mind goes, right? So there's going to be some discussions with town and DPW and how does stormwater get managed, and those things do get taken into consideration. So I wanted to sometimes sometimes people have those questions, but they're afraid to ask them. So those are things that get taken into consideration, because if you're me, somebody who worries about this, and you see this sloped driveway going right down to somebody's building, those get taken into consideration too. We think about that. So let's see, let's go with Emily. Emily, did you have your hand raised again or no? No. How about Meredith? Because your hand is still raised, but you might not be. And
I think Matthew's got a new hand up.
Matthew.
Yeah, if I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding what you were just saying, Kate, in terms of stormwater. It seems like with the elevated roadway, you could basically trap a lot of water on the wrong side in an event. That's what you're talking about?
That is something that can happen. So we do look at that, and what we would typically say is that this is, of course, planning level, but that needs to be taken into consideration on where stormwater will go. And so when you get to, we're always looking at, as Trevor put it, implementable solutions. So when we talk about implementation, we would talk about how either you really need to plan for stormwater management here. And you can see there's like, grassy areas. So there might be green infrastructure opportunities to make it, storage or things like that. There might be pumped systems in some locations. Those are the kinds of things that that we want to make sure that everybody knows need to also go into whatever design comes out of these solutions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Oh, Deanne, do you still have your hand? Oh, no, new hand. Deanne, go ahead.
Thank you, Kate.
I told you I'm just as technologically savvy with Zoom as you are, so we're on the same level.
I like to think I'm improving with practice, Kate, but I don't think that's happening. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the recommendation to raise these at-risk roadways along downtown. When we listened, Holly, to some of your presenters in Resilient Nantucket, I think the UK speaker spoke about their best practices were to realign the coastline. And I'm wondering why you would recommend that we hold the line downtown when we have a history of moving back out of harm's way. And there are so many historic structures in this area that are risk. I mean, we could begin moving them right now to higher ground that the town owns, rather than trying to hold the line here, which seems to me antithetical to what we've done in the past.
Yeah, I don't think it's, every option has trade-offs, right? So we've talked about that. So it's not that that's off the table, Deanne. And I like that you've also brought it up, because that is an option that could be considered, right? Is to think about where everything can move. The basic premise here is that the current transportation corridor and infrastructure that serves the downtown with all the utilities, most likely easier to start thinking about protecting than moving all of it. But that being said, there could be a middle ground or an adaptation strategy that combines a couple of those things, whereby something that's really at risk, maybe everybody decides should move, but we protect other portions, maybe along Steamboat Wharf and there. Just knowing the nature of the island and having everything having to come through this area, and with all the utilities and roadways, it can be really costly to actually move all that, rather than think about raising it or putting some protection in. And again, no answer is perfect. So I do value your input in that, and we're bringing something else to the table here and bringing something else to light. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Anybody we haven't heard from at all? I don't know. I don't want to make you speak if you don't want to speak, but if you do, jump up and down or raise your hand or yell at me. I think I can see everybody. Let me see if I have some other questions. We have about, we just got what, a 10-minute warning, Evan?
Yep. A minute or so.
Okay, let me see if I have some other questions. How are we feeling about, you know, are you willing to accept the potential impacts of this strategy to the downtown in order to protect against long-term flooding? It sounds like maybe some are not, right? And also, we've shown you a certain level of protection, right? So there's a spectrum to this. So is this level of protection where we're saying mean monthly high water, you know, high tide, this is what you get in 2070, but you'd have to come up to this level. Is that level more comfortable to you? Is that what you'd rather see? There's a spectrum, I think. Vince.
Yeah, so I've been trying to play this one around in my head, and I'm extremely interested in this idea of raising roads. But in some ways, wouldn't it be useful to be a causeway that would allow water to come through it as well, but raising the road so we could still have access to the critical infrastructure? Then it'd be slightly more permissible under wetland protection so that water could come and go, and then raise the structures around it, either side as needed, or as property owners would do for themselves with potential assistance, and following, obviously, guidelines that Holly and others in Resilient Nantucket Designs for Adaptation have just been working on. So if this was a causeway and water passed, but we could still access things like Steamboat Wharf when it was flooded on Easy Street, that'd be really handy.
Yeah. That's a living with water scenario, right? So if we think about what your life would be like living with water, it is definitely a possibility, and it's something that other communities have considered and have implemented. Holly, do you have something to say there?
Yes, so both Vince and I agree on green infrastructure and the importance that it would help Nantucket, especially looking at the fact that downtown Nantucket was built pretty much on a marsh. And I can actually show people that's recorded at the Registry of Deeds of where Easy Street, that land was actually filled in way back in the 1800s. And so, you know, taking that into consideration, maybe it's not just looking at where the elevation
it's probably
is now,
this line right here.
No, that's actually Quantity Bank. That's the break. That's yeah. Yeah, that's Quantity Bank. No, I'm actually talking about right on Easy Street, where I think John Killen, I think he was captain,
yes,
filled it in. And you know, I think that's you need to take that into consideration, where if we're gonna want to raise our roads and put a causeway and utilize green infrastructure, but also utilize the fact that it's going to be all marsh. You know, I think that's important. Obviously, seeing what the work that the Nantucket Conservation Foundation and Land Bank and what they're wanting to plan as well, I think it all plays out. We cannot, where Resilient Nantucket looks at the individual structure and what it does to the National Historic Landmark and the local district, we're looking at the Coastal Resiliency Plan where we want to see it for the area. And it's important to look at both of them at the same time, looking at what it looks like to the structure and the roads, and what is that going to hinder, you know, what it means to be a historic district. We don't want these structures to be, you know, jeopardized with our National Register. There's all sorts of different things to take into consideration. So my main point is about the green infrastructure and looking at the fact that it's been low down there. We built up on it for a reason not knowing that it was not necessarily a good idea, but they did it because they wanted to go to the Great Harbor, which is what our harbor is after Kapong Pong closed up. So those are all important, looking at the history and looking at that level of the ground and what it means, and really looking at where we want to accommodate these structures. I think it would be really disheartened, and we would be remiss as a town if we went in and said, hey, we want everybody from this side over to deal with an elevated road, and yet they're not going to be able to accommodate their structure, whether it's historic or not. So those, I think, really need to come into play. Sorry, I'm long-winded.
No, it's good. I'm getting it. Yeah, typically a lot of times you see where the filled land really matches up with that flood line. So it's interesting. Any other thoughts here? Matthew.
Yeah,
Matthew has another hand up.
I'm just trying to understand the idea of raising the roads and letting the water come under, having some sort of causeway. I mean, if you're not going to protect those areas that you had in your previous slide where that's all shaded a kind of rusty color, or maybe appropriately a muddy color, then I'm not sure you need to elevate all those roads. If maybe you protect the Steamboat Wharf, but I'm not sure that you have all of those houses that, need roads to access them anymore if you're going to let the water come in. Is that right? Or what am I missing?
Well, the idea would be, right? So if you actually raise the roadways here, if those homes were going to stay, I'm going to go to the right figure here, right? So if we raise some of these roadways, but we're letting water in, the homes to that line, that flooding line, all the homes and buildings, if they protected themselves, you would only have to raise the roadway for access, and you would still be providing access. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a good way of, you may have a shorter length that you have to, so your point is well taken, Matthew, is what I'm trying to say. You may have a shorter length of what you have to raise to provide just a bit of access to the wharf and to some other points. It's a possibility, but the other point is that you could raise the roadway to a much higher level and be your roadway would be protected during storms as well. You would still have access during the larger storms out into 2070, as opposed to only protecting or having a roadway that's accessible during mean monthly high water by 2070. Does that make sense? It's almost 8 o'clock, guys. I'm sorry if I'm not coherent.
Just you're exactly right, Kate. It's the only thing that I would add is that where the green route is and the other roads that go out to Point and Easton Street and that area, they're arterial routes. They're main corridors for coming and going to the harbour for ferries, goods and services, and accessing shops and everything else we need.
Yeah, so this diagram may help us again, is that, this level of roadway raising only gets you to just above mean monthly high water, so the high tide during the month, the highest high tide during the month. And we would have to go to this level to protect during, a big storm. And so you could get that level of protection by raising the roadway, but also allowing some water underneath and protecting the buildings at a building scale level as an option. Okay, I think we're going to get kicked out soon, guys, and back into the main meeting. So I'm going to say my final thank you. And we may owe some of you some answers about what we're looking at and when. So we will try and get back to you all with those things. And I'm really excited that you all showed up tonight and gave us your input. And we're going to go back to the main room to close out the evening. Thanks, everybody.